So I want to say thank you so much, Sheriff Todd Baxter, for joining Tocsin Magazine.
Oh, thank you.
Now, I hear a lot of great things about you, the man behind the badge. Who is he?
Well, he's a simple person, really. When it comes down to the day, the title of sheriff is really pretty awesome. It's prestigious in our government, right? But I'm just a police officer. I love being a police officer. I love helping other people. I love getting bad guys that are terrorizing neighborhoods off the streets, and a lot of people enjoy their life. And I love the servant part of it, you know. So at the end of the day, I'm just a police officer blessed to raise through the ranks.
Now, how long have you been in law enforcement?
So I started actually in 1983 with the United States Army. I was a military police officer for 3 years, and then coming off active duty, I took my first civil service exam, and by the grace of God, I scored 100 on the test, and became a Rochester cop for over 22 years.
Oh, wow.
Where I was a captain, and then I went out to the town of Greece for a few years to work in what was considered a corrupt police department at that time, and my job was to go out there and try and straighten it out and work with the great cops that were still out there, that remained, and build community trust back in that law enforcement organization. And then 4 years ago I ran for sheriff, and been blessed to be elected sheriff.
Now, were you born and raised in Monroe County?
So I was actually born in Allegheny County, in a town called Cuba. We laugh about that all the time,
Really?
that I'm from Cuba, right? But I was raised in the city of Rochester. We moved here when I was 1. I went to city schools, 30 school, and then Jefferson High School, where I met my bride.
Oh, wow, that's amazing.
Yeah, we both went to Jeff, so we're pretty proud of that.
So tell me, how do you manage to police in 2021?
Yeah. Well, the world has changed, you know, drastically, and some for the good, right? And you know, I always quote, and I paraphrase right now, but Robert Kennedy always talked about how a community gets the law enforcement organization it deserves, right?
Mm-hmm.
Right, it deserves. I thought that was a great title or word that, you know, so the changes we see in law enforcement, people often ask me, well, how can you do proactive, aggressive, if you will, law enforcement when you got such a violent surge? You need to be out there, right, and grabbing the guys with the guns and working with the families of victims that are shot. But at the same time, do the reforms. And I don't think it's that difficult, you know. I think because we police the community, we are the community, so it's not an us versus them. So I find it a lot of work, but I don't find it that challenging. Every good cop has always been a community police officer. If they were good and held to a high standard in law enforcement, I can guarantee they know how to work. They knew how to work with their community they were policing.
Well, you don't hear too many great things about police officers
Right.
these days. How have you maintained to still have a great reputation and still be like a police officer or a
Right.
sheriff? Because you're the top guy.
Yeah, I think you don't dig into foxholes. You know, using my military background, you know, there's not no one's got the right answer in anything. I was literally just asked on social media, well, what's the solution to crime? What's the solution to violent crime? What's the solution to gun crime? I'd be a billionaire. I'd be a billionaire, and I'd fix it tomorrow, right? But it's the perfect cocktail sometimes. It's the perfect, you know, there's obviously structural things. There's poverty, right? There's trauma in young kids' lives that if we don't correct that when they're young, they are naturally going to become with a propensity towards violence, if that's all they grew up with, right? That's a gimme, right? And on the other side of it, law enforcement has a part to play, to keep a lid on things, to help out as much as possible, to chase the guys that are carrying guns, that are terrorizing other people in our community, right? And on the other side, there's recovery. What do we do with someone that's incarcerated, right? If they're not gonna stay in prison for life, then they're become a community member sooner or later, right? So what are we doing when they're incarcerated? You can have these conversations. I think that's where I stay. Last week, I probably shouldn't say this in public, but I was sued, right? Sued by 2 very fringe groups of our community.
Really?
Two fringe, you know, very left and very right. So what that tells me is that we're probably somewhere in the middle that people really expect law enforcement to be, right? We can't say all this and all that. And when people start talking like that, I usually want to tone them out, because, you know, when people start yelling, I have the solution to all the world's problems, I'm like, you probably really don't, you know?
Right. Like,
Yes.
what do you say, because it appears that you're doing such a great job. How do you transfer that energy over to RPD?
Yeah.
How do you do that?
Well, and no, first of all, when I say this, I say it with all due respect. I'm not there. You know, I spent 22 years there. I was a captain when I left. My heart is in the city of Rochester. I grew up in the city of Rochester. My love for the communities in the city of Rochester is 100% committed, right? But I'm very cautious to sit back and try and critique someone else's shop. My job is to help. You know, so when the new chief gets named, right, my job is to help he or she out. See how we can assist. If they need mentorship, guidance, experience, I'm here for them. If they want to leave that alone, they just need help with law enforcement, we're here for that. If they need our victim assistance team, we're here to help and support, guide, mentor if they look for that. But our job as a sheriff, although the lead law enforcement officer in Monroe County, is really I don't go into Irondequoit and tell Irondequoit how to do their job. I don't go into Greece and tell the Grease chief. Our job is to help, and whatever that looks like. And that's exactly what we've been doing. We've been very intense in the city of Rochester the last 3 months with crime fighting people, going strategically after the people we know that are carrying guns. But with that, we're still not the Rochester Police Department. We're here to help them. We're here to assist. And we go out and we do walking patrols, walk almost weekly on Jefferson Avenue because I enjoy that community. They enjoy me. We have an interaction with each other. And we let them know that we're not here to, take over your neighborhood. We're here to help you have peace here on the avenue while you're playing your chess game.
Right.
So you ain't got to worry about someone doing a drive-by, right?
Right.
And, but, there's so many, again, it brings me back to everything's a la carte, right? Mm-hmm. Every person has an individual story. Every community has an individual story. And we got to stop stereotyping everybody, including law enforcement. Don't stereotype cops either. They're all humans, individual stories inside a blue uniform.
Now, many people don't know exactly what you do. So, as the sheriff of Monroe County, what are your responsibilities?
That's a great question. Most people don't. The sheriff position in each county is in the Constitution of the state of New York. There will be an elected sheriff in each county. And I think that's so important that they realized hundreds of years ago that law enforcement, with the power that we have, right, with the position we have in the community, should be directly responsible to the people. And that's what an election does. Although I don't enjoy going through a campaign
right.
by any means, the fact is I'm 100% responsible, not to any politicians, not to a Democrat, Republican. I am responsible to the people in Monroe County, right? And if they don't like what I'm doing, they vote you out. Mm-hmm. And that's very powerful. That's the first difference between a sheriff and a police chief, who's appointed by a political party or a political board or anything like that, right? That's the number one difference. The structural things that are quite different is besides law enforcement, we do, we have a road patrol, about 300 deputies, and we do primary law enforcement in towns that don't have their own police department, and then we assist other towns in the city, like I explained earlier.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, so we have 300 cops, if you will, doing law enforcement. We also have a jail bureau. We run a jail. No police chief runs a jail. The county sheriff runs a jail. We have about 730 incarcerated people today inside that jail. So I'm responsible for the care and custody. That means 3 square meals, right? That means working on their mental health. That means working on their physical health. And when he's discharge them appropriately back when they leave the jail. That's a huge burden. We have about 500 deputies that do that job function.
Oh, wow.
Plus hundreds of thousands of dollars of contracts that we bring into there to work with their inmate population, right? So it's a large job. That's the largest portion of my job, believe it or not, is the jail. Then we have the court bureau. We have about 100 deputies that secure all the courthouses in Monroe County, keep the jury safe, keep the judges safe, keep it a tranquil environment for our final portion of criminal justice to occur in a tranquil environment, the courthouse.
Okay.
Keep that area. And then what people don't realize is the sheriff also runs a civil bureau. Every county has a civil bureau. And most people don't even know what that is.
No, I don't.
Right. And it's really the enforcement end of the courthouse. So if a judge says there's a custody battle and there's a father or mother doesn't want to give up custody of the child, who would actually enforce that, right? If the judge says the child must go to parent A and parent B says no, it has to be in a law enforcement entity. And that's what a civil bureau does. Or if you sue me and you win and I owe you $200,000, right? And I said you're never going to get that money, there has to be a law enforcement. So the civil bureau does that enforcement. And each county sheriff has a civil bureau by the New York State Constitution. That, people don't even realize
wow.
that.
No, I haven't.
Isn't it amazing, isn't it? Yeah, it's amazing.
So you know what's funny? I interviewed Laron Singletary when he was the chief.
Yep.
And we discussed about being born and raised. So could the community be a little biased because you were born and raised and everybody thinking you're so wonderful? Or have you really put the work in?
No, I think first of all, being raised in the city of Rochester,
Not
going to
born.
city school, right? And since 5, walking down Otis Street to go to the 30 school, and then walking across the bridge to go to Jefferson, it humbles you. I'll just use minority populations. I think I have a great relationship with minority. Not perfect, but a great relationship. And not because I'm minority. I'm a 56-year-old white male. I got that, right? I got that. And I'm a cop. But the fact is, I grew up with people of color, right? I grew up in difficult neighborhoods. I grew up with people, calling my friends the N-word. right? And I still get goosebumps. They're like, we used to fight over that for our friends, right? You know, so it doesn't make me African American, doesn't make me a person of color, but it makes me just a little more, empathetic, I think, of people that are, weren't born. We aren't a white cop at 57 years old, right? It just gives you a different feeling. So I think that's the first thing I'm able to do. I grew up in a house with domestic violence, I have a strong compassion for women going through domestic violence because I watched what my mother went through. And again, my stepfather was a great man, I think, but he had problems just like everybody has problems, right? I have a problem, you have a problem, we all have problems, right? So, we got to stop looking at each other, and paint with these huge wide brushes, whether you're a cop or not. A lot of these police officers, have that experience in their life too and go, maybe their family member was killed by a drunk driver. And they just love DWI enforcement and they're out there every night getting drunks off the road so they don't kill your family or mine. I think that's one of the benefits I have of relating to the community is that I grew up in the community, And,
that's powerful.
Yeah, it's definitely powerful. And it's an advantage my kids didn't even have. We moved to the suburbs and raised our kids in the suburban. And I look at them and like, they miss something. They definitely miss something.
Now, as far as going back to the inmates that you are responsible for, how have you been protecting them against COVID?
Yeah, so what occurs in the community will occur inside the jail, right? It's just, there's walls around it and there's a fence around it and there's checkpoints to get into it. But, social norms in the community end up in the jail, right? Diseases, tuberculosis, right? If it's out there, those walls are not that difficult to get through with social norms or even, with the COVID. So we've been very intentional. We've been over the top. We set up a COVID command post here. We put a captain, took a deputy and officers from different bureaus and put them their full-time job was to run this command post, keep track of the numbers of inmates, keep track of the staff that's hot, who's tested, who's not, who's vaccinated, who's not. Keep daily charts of all that stuff. Where are all our PPE, our protective equipment? We were the first ones probably in Monroe County that had sufficient numbers of PPE because we established logistics, right? We started looking at that. We cut off decisions like visitations inside the jail. That's a very difficult thing to stop. As a sheriff, visitations are so important to the inmate population, right? And think about this, it's so important to my staff too, because if you can visit your loved one, you're gonna be a better inmate. And there's less confrontation with my staff. It makes everybody happier and safer and builds that social, as you're getting ready to get out, you're starting your social skills back up with someone else outside the walls. So to turn that off, I'm just using that as one example, but we made bold decisions right off the bat for the safety of the inmate. We're turning off social visits, which was not popular by anybody. Even my staff didn't enjoy that because everybody's pent up now. But those are the decisions you had to make, and where I'm at is that COVID command post that we started. That we treated it like a military operation. This is something attacking our jail, and what would we do with that? So it's been a great learning tool. We've learned a lot. Another thing we started is 100% testing of our staff. Whether you're a deputy or you're a contractor, a nurse coming into work inside your first day back to work. We started this months ago, probably 9 months. You will get tested your first day back to work. And last week, I think we found 6 people that would have been in the jail, one way or another, whether it's sworn deputies or civilian staff, that would have been in the jail, asymptomatic, because they don't show up if they got a symptom. There's 6 people that would have showed up inside the jail, COVID positive.
So at this point in your career, what would you like the community to know about Sheriff Todd Baxter?
Yeah, ironically, I'm up for election, right? And this is not a campaign stunt, but this is November 2nd, 30 days from now. I've been doing this for 4 years. I do this job because I love it. I had a great job running a nonprofit shortly before I ran for office, and I was taking care of veterans, one of our most precious commodities in our communities, people that served our country, right? But I ran for sheriff because I truly love law enforcement. I truly love being a police officer. I truly love helping other people. It's not cliche. I can go back and run a nonprofit and be perfectly happy with less the burden. I can guarantee that. And the inmate population. It's again, there's some people inside that jail. I'm not so touchy-feely that I'm not a realist. There's rapists, there's murder suspects, there's people that have been charged with domestic abuse. And you know how I feel about domestic abuse, right? And they can break big rocks into little rocks for a long, long time, some of these people. But, the 700 and so odd people that are in that jail today, maybe 500, 600, pick a number, never had a shot in their life, right? Never had a chance in their life. And they did their crime, do your time, but what do we do with them while they're in there, right? What do we do to make them better people? What do we do to give them job training and job placement? And it's a win for everybody. That still motivates me to 4 years later. That's why I ran for sheriff, is really the jail population. What can we do different? And if you think about, if I can get someone to leave the jail and become a productive father, a productive citizen. They're paying taxes, right? They're not collecting any social service. They're fathering their children or mothering their children with a good job, and they're using that as an example for other people that might want to commit crime or are in the jail. They're future mentors. I can go on for a week and a half of the benefits. That when we put time and resources inside the jail, if we change 5, 10, 15 guys and they leave better citizens, man, everybody wins. Everybody across the board, you know. Simple example, you know, someone's in there for, let's say, grand larceny, stole over $1,000 from someone, they got convicted of that, and they have to serve 6 months in the Monroe County Jail, right? I'm here to tell you, we're not so good in law enforcement that the first time they committed that grand larceny, we caught them the first time and got them convicted, right?
Right.
How many victims were before that, right? And if we can straighten that person out, how many less victims will be later on of that person that might commit future crime? So everybody wins. The individual incarcerated, right? The future victims, you know, justice for the past victims. If they're a parent, you know, the kids are going to win. Everybody wins. The community wins if we can just help 1 or 2 or 20 or 30. So I don't put numbers on it, but I look at each person as an individual and let's see if we can get some wins out of that population.
So what do you think about the current bail reform?
Yeah.
That's a nightmare.
I laugh because it's again, going to foxholes, right? Everyone wants to get in a foxhole and defend their position on it. You know, any plan executed. I started in the Army in 1983. One of the first things they talked about are operational plans. You spend a week preparing for this. Take that hill, right? We gotta take that hill, right?
Right.
You do all the logistics, you do all the pre-training, you get all the, and then you go to execute that plan. We realize in the Army, as soon as you go to execute the first movement of that plan, it's going to get screwed up. The environment changes. The bad guys change, right? Everything changes. And we're bold enough in the Army. We teach 18-year-old kids in the Army, when you go to execute the plan, it's okay to adjust it. Be flexible. See what's working. Do more of that. See what didn't work. Stop doing that, right? And what we do with bail reform is everybody's in their foxholes. And we know there's small tweaks that need to be made to it, but we don't want to go back to where we were either, right? A kid doesn't have $50 in his pocket, but some other kid does. Should not determine how long they spend in jail, right? Are they a flight risk? Are they repeatedly committing the same act multiple times over and over? Or are they a risk to themselves or a risk to someone else in the community for safety reasons? And if we can present that logically to a judge and let them determine that person needs to spend 4 hours in jail, 4 days in jail, or in jail to the next trial date or a hearing date. But we're so dug in our foxholes that I could literally go to your house right now and kick your dog, if you have a dog, right? You can call the police, I can arrest you, give you an appearance, you can go right back over and kick that dog again.
Right.
And as long as you want to keep on kicking that dog, there's not much I can do about it, you can do about it, kicking your dog. And I use that just as a simple example of, what about if they're carrying a gun? We catch them twice in 1 month, catch them twice in 2 months. The likelihood of that person carrying a gun dying, right? Him or her dying, let alone the future victim of them. Why are they carrying a gun? Obviously something's totally out of control in that person's life, right? Can we at least detain them for a few hours or a few weeks and work on them as a person when they leave here with a transition plan? Maybe they got to go to another city and live with a man. I don't know. But can we look at that person as an individual and say, what is going wrong in this person's life, let alone the future victim, that when they pull that trigger, they're going to change their life, they're going to change a whole family, maybe even a community for a long, long time. We can't even have those conversations.
Right.
You know, and I'm bold enough to have those conversations. You have people want to scream at me all day long, like, what are you talking about? Like, I'm talking about saving people's lives. I'm talking about looking at people as individuals. Don't make this blanket stuff. And don't be so bold. We executed a plan. Make a few adjustments. Keep the tenets of bail reform. That's easy. But also look at the future victims, right? Look at this person as a perpetrator. What's going wrong in their life? We can't even do that.
I know, it's so crazy.
We can't even have a conversation like that if people don't want to talk.
So the other day, there was a standoff in the South Wedge area.
Yeah.
Now, I don't know, they said the sheriff's office was out there, but I didn't see any sheriff cars. But my concern was, this guy was irate. He needed some type of mental help. But the police left him. So they received some call to tell them that stand down mental health experts were there. They left this guy crazy, still there. Is this part of the the defunding the police, where we're now having the mental health workers try to take control of people who are out of control? And then the community got involved, and so it was like really chaotic. The police left this guy out here basically for the community to deal with.
Right.
Did you hear about that?
No, I didn't hear about that particular case. No, but so part of the So that particular case, I can't speak on, I'm not familiar with it, but, you know, it comes back to, you can put the term defunding on it, which is a very antagonistic, blah, 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 right? And everybody gets in their foxholes again and defend it or not. But is there ways to look at we look at every one of those cases, I call them a problem, right? Because that's how I was trained. It's a problem. How do we solve this problem? Short term and long term, right?
Right.
So sometimes, maybe it's better for another professional in the community to solve that problem. Sometimes there's a need for law enforcement to solve that problem or stabilize that problem. What we got to get away from is it's all or none, right? It's all or one, right? And that's where we're getting in. Again, these foxholes, I call them, these positions of defense, right? I got to defend my position no matter what. We in law enforcement have been doing certain things for years. I'll give you an example of a medical call. You know, because EMTs have been hurt in the past and firefighters have been hurt on medical calls that actually were a safety issue when they went there. We think of West Webster, right? On Christmas Eve, responding to a fire call, and we lost firefighters. So now a police officer goes to every one of those fire calls, right? Just to make sure the firefighters are safe. Sometimes the firemen beat us there and cancel us. I'm here, I'm familiar with it, we don't need any law enforcement. Sometimes we beat them there, we tell them we got to work in fire, or there's no fire, we don't need. We've been working in this environment with other professionals for a long, long time. I think we can get to a point, which safety has always got to be the paramount thing, right? So a police officer gets there, it's a mental health call, maybe they triage it real quick and say, there's no need for us, a blue uniform, badge, gun, to solve this problem. The house is stabilized, the guy's having, you know, some kind of breakdown right now. And as long as, you know, a fit team or any other professionals right behind us, maybe we wait for them, stabilize the house, and then we leave as soon as they get there. Or maybe we stay there and protect them while they do their magic, right? And work with the person going through a mental health crisis. Maybe we have to force them into an ambulance at this time because they're so out of control that they have to be MHA, mental health arrest, and taken them to the hospital to work on their mental health issues. They're all so different, right? That's what I'm saying. Every one of those calls is so dynamic, and who knows what's coming in a 911.
Right.
And by the time you get there, what's really occurring. It's like that old game we played in English class, right? Where I tell the captain, I tell the lieutenant, and then it gets back to me, it's a totally different story, right? Right? I mean, that's just, that's human nature. And, but people don't want to even talk like that. They're like, there could possibly be something totally different. So on those calls, let's err on the side of caution. Let's triage the call and get law enforcement if they're not needed out there as quick as possible. But if they're needed for safety reasons, they have to stay. You know, they can work in, you know, it's going back to that, it's all or none mentality. There's no such thing. The world is too dynamic.
Tell us something we don't know about you. Come on, give us some dirt.
Oh, really?
I like dirt.
Wow.
Give us some dirt.
Oh, I'm a pretty open person. Yeah, I'm going to be boring because that's what I am. I'm an introvert.
Oh, really?
Most people think Todd Baxter's an extrovert. My job is persona, go out there, you know, be a leader and all that. There's nothing Todd likes more than going for a hike by himself. No offense to my family members. I like to go home and sit in my man cave, watch a baseball game, and just relax. You know, to go to a social event really wears me out. You know, I'd much rather not talk to people and just bury myself in my little corner. I'm really an introvert.
Oh, really?
Nature, yeah.
Okay. Now, what music?
That was very boring. See,
oh, I know, right?
Yeah.
So what music do you listen to? Who's your favorite artist?
Wow. Growing up, Boston, rock group Boston. Nowadays, it's country music, Chris Stapleton. You know.
Okay.
And,
Name a rapper?
Well, I was listening to Kanye West yesterday.
Okay.
I was on my workout routine.
Okay.
Yeah. So I don't know if it's good or bad. I don't know who's popular. I don't know.
You might have it, like we said, it's somewhere.
I don't
in the
even know
middle.
if Snoop Dogg's still a racist or not, but he makes me laugh every time I see one of his commercials. I'm like, how does he do that? Like, he just sits there on a lounge chair having a beer or something. Like, how's that guy making money off that? I can't like.
So I'm so happy that you spoke with us. Tell me something, did you feel like I missed anything? Is there anything you want to add to this, to people who have to go out and vote for you?
Well, thank you. You know, it's really quite simple. We are one community, right? We're not perfect by any means. In my world, I'm a Christian. That's because of our human nature. And, you know, we're destined not to be perfect animals. We need more grace. We need to spend more time in the grace column, right? Let me call this person and see why they said that. I know I'm going to say something on this video that's going to offend someone. Pick up the freaking phone and call me. And then if you're still offended, call me out because maybe I did it and I didn't know it, or don't like me. I'm good, but pick up the phone, call someone. It's like, why are they doing it? You know, we are just so filled with us versus them. And you know, I'll be bold enough to go, you know, I didn't grow up in the 1960s, right? But it was just in the 1960s that African American people weren't allowed to drink out of the same water fountain, right? Mm-hmm. I would kill someone if they tried to implement that today, right? I would fight them tooth and nail. But that doesn't make us perfect. maybe better, right? But not perfect, right? And that's what I keep on. We got a lot of work to do just in that one subject. You can take a million subjects. But let's just use that one because it's very almost like controversial. No, it's not controversial. It says, man, we just got to constantly make ourselves better and better and better, as opposed to tear each other down, down, down. Call it out like it is. I got no problem with that. But let's build upon it with the sense of how do we make ourselves better and better and better and better. So I hope that wasn't too controversial,
No.
but I would fight tooth and nail right now if someone came up with it. Can you imagine?
Right.
I can't even imagine. I'm like, I get frustrated. Like, really? 2 water fountains? Are we freaking serious?
Right.
But doesn't mean we're perfect, right? Just
Right,
means let's
no.
keep on progressing in that direction. We'd fight tooth and nail if someone even suggests that right now. Right?
So it sounds like you're the guy we need in this position.
Thank you.
That I've heard great things about you. Now having the chance to speak with you, knowing you grew up in the city, knowing just these things about you that probably a lot of people don't know.
Yeah.
Is very important.
Yeah, and it comes with one hell of a title, right?
Yeah.
You're right, a sheriff. Oh,
Right,
sheriff,
a
right?
sheriff.
Yeah, at the end of the day, trust me, I put a lot of good people around me. I ask for a lot of advice. I do a lot of prayer. And for some reason, I'm in this position. We'll do it as best we can. That's all we can do.
Yes.
For the best reasons possible.
Okay, thank you
Awesome,
so
thank
much.
you. Yeah.